Well, welcome to the first module of Break. Well, welcome to the first module of Breaking 200. In this video and in the couple ones that are going to follow, we're going to get right into the first thing you need to do in order to lead a growing church, or to lead a church that's growing past 200 regular attenders. And this first series of videos is all about reaching guests. And in this video, I want to talk to you about creating a meaningful guest experience. Now, here's why this is so important. If you want to reach a bunch of people in your community, if you want the church to grow past 200, you've got to reach new people. You've got to invite first-time guests to come in. In fact, we've surveyed hundreds and hundreds of churches, and the top question that people are asking, they're saying, Michael, Rob, Church Fuel team, how do we invite more guests to come to church? We've got a decent thing going, but how do we get more people in the door? So I want to talk to you about creating a meaningful guest experience. Now, as we dive into this, this is not all just church strategy and church growth tactics. This actually comes straight from the Bible. I mean, I love the Bible. I hope you love the Bible. I hope the Bible influences your ministry in a big way. There's this really strange verse. I love it. It's an interesting verse. Hebrews chapter 13:12. It talks about showing hospitality. In fact, you can open up your concordance or just do a Google search and search for what does the Bible have to say about hospitality. And you're going to find a ton of verses. And one that you'll find is Hebrews chapter 13, verse 12. And it says that we need to show hospitality to strangers. We need to show kindness and hospitality to all kinds of people. Because sometimes when we do this, we're actually entertaining angels and we're not even aware of it. So that is a weird and awesome verse to me, because it talks about how this foundation, this biblical command to just be hospitable, to be kind, to be welcoming to strangers, not just family, but strangers. And sometimes when we do that, we may even be entertaining angels. In 1 Peter chapter 4:9, it says that we're supposed to show hospitality to all people. So creating a welcoming environment for guests in your church is really about showing hospitality from an organizational perspective. Just like we as Christians are supposed to show kindness and hospitality to one another and to strangers, we as a church, we're supposed to be welcoming and inviting to guests. Now, this is not just a church thing. This is a Christian thing. This has nothing to do with the message that you're preaching. This is not about watering the gospel. This is not about being seeker-friendly. I don't like any of those terms. This is simply being a good Christian and being welcoming to people when they come to your church. So I want to just walk you through real quick 5 opportunities where I think you have an incredible opportunity to show hospitality. 5 places in your church where you can show hospitality and create a guest-friendly environment. The first is this. The first is your website. The first is your website. I remember a long time ago I went to a church leadership conference, and the guy that was talking said the sermon begins in the parking lot. The sermon begins in the parking lot. When people drive into your parking lot, that's when the sermon actually begins. I think it's actually backed up a step from that, and I think now the sermon begins on your website. In other words, before guests visit your church, they're going to visit your website. And so with your website, you need to do this. It's so important. Your website needs to set expectations. Your website needs to communicate to guests what they're going to experience. I think on your homepage of your website, you should have a tab, a button, a link, a very visible thing that says, if you're new, click here, new here, plan a visit. And on that page, you should communicate to people what to expect. Because people have questions about your church and you need to answer them on the website. Your guest process begins before they even visit your church. So let people know what to wear. Let people know the address. Let people know where to go. Let people know if they've got kids, what's going to happen. Let people know how long the service is going to be. Let people know what's going to happen at church. Show them pictures. Show them videos. It's so much more important to describe the experience than to describe all your beliefs as a church for guests. Your website is an opportunity that you have to begin to connect with guests before they even walk in the door. So that's opportunity number 1 is your website. Opportunity number 2 is your first impressions. Now, when we say first impressions, I mean your parking lot people, the people standing at your door, greeters, ushers. I mean kind of those first touch people. Think of your first touch people as like the first responders to an accident, right? They're the people who show up first in a crisis, first responders. Well, your first impression people, hopefully they're not showing up at accidents. They're showing up at key places, opportunities in your church where you can meet people and say hello. So your first impressions goal is to say hello. Your opportunity with your first impressions is to say hello. Website, set expectations. First impressions, say hello. So maybe you need a parking team. Maybe you need a greeter team. Maybe you need ushers. You need to put friendly people. This is not rocket science. This is not complicated. You need to put friendly people at key places in your church. So how's your first impressions? You've got to put friendly people at key places in order to create a welcoming environment for guests. That's number 2. Number 3, kids check-in. Kids check-in. Now this is not going to apply to everybody, but this is going to be a big deal for those who have kids. If people are coming to your church for the first time and they're bringing kids, that is the most stressful and one of the most tension-filled areas in church. Listen, as a parent, and I have visited many churches with my family sometimes, dropping off my kids and checking in kids, particularly elementary or preschool age kids, is traumatic. I mean, you may have new moms who are dropping their kids off for their very first time. And in your kids check-in, you have an incredible opportunity to remove tension. So what's the key word you want to do here with kids check-in? Remove tension. You want to make it smooth, make it friendly. You need to have friendly people at kids check-in, not people who are trying to move through a checklist. You need to have friendly people at kids check-in, not people who are trying to move through a checklist and collect information, but friendly people who know how to bring the tension level down. Kids check-in is an incredible opportunity to win over families with your intentionality and with your spirit and with your helpfulness. Kids check-in, that's number 3. Number 4, your service. Your service. And we're going to talk more about this in another module, but your church service is an incredible opportunity you have to engage guests. Now listen, I don't like the term seeker sensitive. I don't even know what that means. I think we're supposed to be people sensitive. I mean, in our church service, we should just be sensitive to the fact that there's guests there. Even if you know for a fact that every single person there is a member. If you are in a church and every single person there is your family, you still need to speak to guests every Sunday to set the tone that guests are supposed to be there. And so in your service, what you need to do, here's the key word, explain everything. You can do whatever you want in a service, but you have to explain it for guests. If you're going to baptize people, hey, listen, that's really weird for somebody who doesn't know what that means. So explain it. If you're going to read from the book of Ephesians, that's great. You should read from the book of Ephesians. But don't assume everybody there knows what the book of Ephesians is. If you're going to do the Lord's Supper and you're going to say, take, eat, this is my body and this is my blood shed for you, if you're going to do that, that's great. In fact, that's incredibly symbolic and meaningful, but it makes no sense to an unchurched person if you don't explain it. Hey, singing is weird, so explain it. Taking up an offering, passing around little silver plates with felt in the bottom of them is weird, so explain it. You can do just about whatever you want to do in a church service, but you've got to explain it. So explain it like there's guests in the room. Think of the things that you do in church from a guest perspective. And if you're going to do something, just explain it. Explain everything. And then number 5 is this. Follow up. Follow up. And we're going to talk about how to do this more, but follow up. Follow up, here's the key phrase for follow up. It's start a conversation. So the form letters, they don't work. They don't work. Why? Because they're not personal. They're not conversational. And your goal with follow-up, and we're going to talk about designing a follow-up process, the goal with follow-up is to create conversations with people, to start conversations and develop relationships with people who visit your church. And so the first thing you've got to do if you want to grow past 200 is you've got to look at your whole entire Sunday morning through the lens of a guest. And you've got to say, is this experience that they're going to have, is it meaningful? Is it clear? Is it impactful? Yes, we're going to talk to them about Jesus. Yes, we're going to teach their kids about Jesus. Yes, we're going to challenge them to take steps in their faith. But you can't get to any of that if they come in the door and they immediately go, this place is not for me. So step number one in Breaking 200 is create a meaningful guest experience so that when guests come and they visit your church, it makes sense and it's a place where they want to come back. So here's your homework. I want you to do something that's going to sound a little bit weird if you've never done it before. I want you to hire a secret shopper. See, you don't know what your experience at church is like to a guest because you're not a guest, you're the pastor. You don't know what the guest experience is like at your church because you haven't been a guest at your church in a long, long time. And even when you try to think like a guest, you can't really do it. So here's what you do. You hire a secret shopper. Now, there are people that do this. You can go on Craigslist and ask somebody. You can get a friend. You can ask a neighbor. You can get somebody who's never been to your church before to come to your church and just be a guest, be a fly on the wall. Listen, take some notes, and then sit down with them afterwards. Maybe they can write up an email, share their experience, or try to sit down with them and have a conversation to get their perspective. You don't know what it's like to be a guest at your church. So hire a secret shopper to come into your church and evaluate everything from your website to your first impressions to your kids' check-in to the service to what happens afterwards. Find out firsthand what it's like to be a guest in your church. Hire a secret shopper and work on your first-time guest experience.